Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're setting aside the usual policy papers and grabbing something a bit different. Field guides. Specifically, we're looking at what might just be the most significant update in, well, modern bird guides. We are diving deep into the newest edition of the National Audubon Society Birds of North America. Now, usually, when a classic guide gets an update, it's pretty minor, a few tweaks here and there. But the buzz around this new Audubon guide, it's different. People are calling it a huge deal. It's being framed less as a revision and more like a complete reimagining of how we identify and really understand birds.
That's absolutely the core of it. Our mission today is to figure out why. Why terms like complete overhaul or scientific and visual encyclopedia? I mean, on the surface, it's a book with bird pictures, right? But we need to unpack what's changed fundamentally. We're talking about covering over 800 species regularly found here. What makes this guide so essential for someone learning about birds today?
Okay, yeah, let's get into that. Because the scope feels massive.
Yeah.
And for anyone familiar with older guides, the way they were organized could be, well, sometimes a bit confusing, even if familiar. So the first big change seems to be scientific, right? How the birds are actually ordered in the book.
Precisely. If you look back at older guides, even really classic ones, birds were often grouped, well, practically, maybe by color.
Right, like all the little yellow birds together, or maybe the big ducks.
Exactly. Which can be helpful when you're just starting, I suppose, but scientifically it's kind of arbitrary. This new Audubon guide basically throws that out. It organizes species strictly by family and, crucially, by their evolutionary relationships, modern taxonomy.
And that's based on the latest science.
Absolutely. It reflects the most current ornithological research, the latest classification updates. So when you're flipping through it, you're not just seeing birds that look vaguely similar, you're seeing birds grouped because they share a deep biological history, a lineage.
That actually matters a lot, doesn't it? It helps you predict things.
How so?
Well, say I identify a bird, and the guide tells me it's in the Parulidae family, the wood warblers. Just knowing that family connection tells me something immediately, like I should probably be looking up high-end trees, maybe expect certain kinds of quick movements, insect-eating behavior. Even their songs might have a certain quality. It gives you instant biological context beyond just what it looks like.
That's a great point. The organization itself becomes part of the learning process. It links appearance to ecology right away.
Okay, so that's the scientific foundation, a huge shift. The second really bold move seems to be visual. For decades, illustrations were the standard. Highly detailed, often beautiful paintings. This guide goes all in on high-resolution photographs.
Yeah, exclusively photos.
Which to us now might sound obvious, but in the world of bird guides, that's a major departure from tradition. The idea is that photos are just easier to match with what you're actually seeing in the field, right? Reality versus an artist's interpretation.
Well, that's the claim, and it makes sense. But, there's always been a counter-argument. Yeah, traditionalists would say illustrations are sometimes better because an artist can specifically emphasize that one tiny key field mark you need for ID. The slightly different wing bar, the shape of the beak, things a single photo might accidentally obscure or just not capture perfectly.
Okay, that's fair. So how does this new guide handle that potential problem with just photos?
It tackles it with, well, quality and quantity. They don't just rely on one perfect shot. The sources say they use multiple angles, perched, flying, different plumages like male, female, maybe even juvenile birds.
So you get a more complete picture.
Exactly. And the real key, I think, is the strategic use of side-by-side comparison photos for those really similar-looking species.
The ones that always trip you up.
Precisely, like trying to tell apart certain flycatchers or maybe some of the confusing fall warblers or those little vireos.
Tell me about it.
This guide puts those problem pairs right next to each other in photos, often highlighting the subtle differences, bill size, wing structure, maybe the eye ring detail. That photographic precision for comparisons, it's designed to cut down on the guesswork that even good illustrations sometimes couldn't fully solve, especially with regional variations.
That really does sound like a game changer. I remember agonizing over differentiating, I think it was a Cassin's vireo and a blue-headed vireo once. Having that direct photo comparison would have saved me so much time and, frankly, frustration. It's about being useful right there in the moment.
Totally. So moving beyond the structure and visuals, let's talk about the sheer amount of information in here. Over 900 pages. That tells you it's doing more than just helping you put a name to a bird.
Right. It covers all the regularly occurring species in North America, over 800 of them.
And the depth for each species is where it becomes, truly encyclopedic, not just a pocket guide.
It seemed designed for someone who wants to go beyond just ticking a box on a checklist.
Definitely. Each entry starts with detailed ID tips. Sure, plumage, size, flight style.
The basics.
The basics, but then you get these incredibly detailed range maps. And they're not just static blobs of color showing where a bird might be found.
They have those seasonal migration overlays you mentioned.
Exactly. Those overlays are critical. They show breeding range, wintering range, and migration routes, often with timing.
So it's not just if a bird is in California, but when you're likely to see, say, a Wilson's warbler in breeding plumage in a specific part of the state.
Precisely. It helps you target your birding based on the bird's actual annual cycle. It tells you where and when to look.
Okay, that's already pretty deep, but it goes further into behavior and ecology, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is where it moves firmly beyond just identification. It starts answering questions like, what is that bird doing? And how does it fit into its environment?
So what kind of details are we talking about?
Really specific insights. Things like preferred feeding techniques, detailed breeding behavior notes, descriptions of songs and calls. Vocalizations are key for ID too, of course.
Nesting styles as well.
Nesting styles, yeah. It builds a whole life history for the species.
And this is where that very modern, very relevant element comes in.
Mm-hmm.
The focus on environmental changes.
Yes, this is crucial. The guide includes notes on rare sightings, which is interesting, and regional variations. But importantly, it incorporates information on climate-related shifts impacting migration patterns and habitat use.
Okay, climate-related shifts. What does that actually look like on the page? Is it just a slightly different map?
It can be reflected in the maps, but it's often more explicit in the text. For species known to be sensitive to things like temperature changes or food availability, the guide might note, for example, that a species is arriving earlier on its breeding grounds than it did historically. Or maybe its wintering range is shifting northward because winters are becoming milder. Or perhaps its overall range is shrinking or expanding.
So it's connecting the bird directly to these bigger environmental trends.
Exactly. It essentially turns the field guide into a snapshot of ornithology in the era of climate change. It's not just relying on data from 30 years ago. It empowers you, the user, not just to identify the bird, but potentially to observe and even document these ongoing changes yourself. You're engaging with current science.
That adds a whole other layer of significance. Okay, so it's scientifically robust, visually modern, incredibly deep, but it's also a big book, 900 pages. How practical is it to actually lug around in the field? Did they manage to make it usable?
That was definitely a design challenge, but the feedback suggests they pulled it off. The sources mention the FlexiBound edition specifically. It's designed to be durable, flexible enough to bend a bit in a pack, sturdy enough to withstand field conditions, moisture, being dropped maybe.
It needs to be tough.
It does. And the layout inside is apparently quite clean and intuitive. Quick glance summaries, clear navigation. The goal is speed.
Because when you see a bird flit by, you don't have time to wrestle with a confusing index.
No, seconds count. And they also include helpful tools right in the front matter.
Like what?
Tips for beginners, mainly. How to effectively use binoculars or a spotting scope. Simple things, like how to find the bird quickly through the lens.
That's really useful if you're just starting out.
For sure. But it also acknowledges that birding today isn't just about the physical book.
Right. Everyone's got apps on their phones.
Exactly. So the guide offers advice on using popular birding apps, maybe linking observations to platforms like eBird, using digital tools alongside the book.
So it complements modern tech rather than ignoring it.
It embraces it. And it also includes practical planning aids, like seasonal calendars suggesting good times for migration watching and recommending regional hotspots.
That's really helpful for planning trips. It's a very complete package.
It is. And all of this ties back to the core mission of the Audubon Society itself, which brings us to the final, crucial element: conservation and ethics.
It's not just about identifying birds for fun. It's about understanding their place and protecting them.
Precisely. The guide integrates conservation status directly into each species account. It uses data from the IUCN.
That's the international body that tracks extinction risk.
Correct. The global standard. It combines IUCN data with Audubon's own research to show you, right there on the page, if a species is doing okay or it's considered vulnerable, endangered, or near threatened.
So as you're learning about the bird, you're also learning about its conservation needs immediately.
Yes. And it's not just passive information. The guide actively promotes ethical birdwatching.
What does that entail?
Things like minimizing disturbance, especially near nests or during sensitive breeding seasons, staying on trails, not using playback excessively to lure birds.
Basic respect for the wildlife.
Basic respect, exactly. And it encourages supporting habitat protection efforts. It frames birding as an activity that comes with a responsibility to the birds themselves.
Okay, so let's try to pull this all together. What makes this guide stand out so much?
I think it's that successful blend. It combines the latest scientific understanding that modern taxonomy reflecting evolution.
And with really practical, modern usability, the fantastic photos, the detailed ecological notes, the integration of field tools and conservation awareness.
It feels like it bridges the gap between, say, a simple ID guide and a dense scientific textbook.
It really does. It moves away from being just a static reference to become more like a dynamic living resource.
Reflecting the Audubon Society's goal, as you said, to connect people with birds and hopefully inspire action to protect them.
Absolutely. It makes deep knowledge accessible, but it's still rigorous enough for serious study. It validates why paying attention to wildlife matters so much right now.
So, thinking about everything we've discussed, the depth on behavior, ecology, those notes on climate shifts, here's something for you, the listener, to consider. How might using a guide like this actually change the way you experience birding? Does it shift it from just, identifying a bird and checking it off a list?
Yeah.
To something more, like actively observing and trying to understand that bird's entire role within its environment, especially an environment that's clearly changing? That shift in perspective from simple naming to understanding the life history, the ecological context, the evolutionary story, it's really the deeper value here, I think. It potentially transforms you from just an observer into someone more like an informed participant, maybe even a citizen scientist contributing to our understanding.
Something to think about next time you're out there. Go explore that connection. We've hopefully given you a good map with this deep dive. Now, you just need your binoculars and maybe this guide.